Welcome back to another interview, and today we speak to Gerald Celente. Now, Gerald is the researcher, writer, and creator of Trends Journal, which is one of my absolute favorite newsletters, breaking down everything from precious metals in the macroeconomic and social climates of the world. Now, before we get into this, just want to say a special shout out to our sponsor today, which is First Majestic. First Majestic is one of my favorite silver mining stocks, and has an amazing CEO, Keith Neumeyer. So be sure to check out First Majestic Silver if you're looking to add to your gold and silver mining stock portfolio. Now, without further ado, right there down below, you'll see the link to Trends Journal if you want to go ahead and check out Gerald's work. Make sure you hit the like button on this side right over there and this side right over there to send this out to more people, and give us a comment down below and let us know what you think. So welcome, Gerald.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So first question, what do you think is the most important trend out of your research that is going to be taking place in 2021 and beyond?
Well, there's no one most important, because our system is called globalnomic, and that means making connections between different fields, that all things are connected. As Chief Seattle said, all things are connected like the blood which unites us all. And so it's a combination of things. So if we're going to look geopolitically and economically, China, our trend is China 2021. The 20th century was the American century. The 21st century is going to be the Chinese century. The business of America has been war. The business of China is business. Now, again, you get the Trends Journal. There's no magazine that putting out what we're putting out week after week. It lasts, 140 something pages, no advertisements. And we're writing about, of course, China, a lot of China information in there. And just for example, China and Europe now are doing the most trading. Europe is doing more trading with China than the United States. China is doing more trading with Europe than the United States. And you look at the trade deficits. The United States trade deficit has gone way up against China. So the Trump thing nothing happened during that at all. You look at gross domestic product in 2020. China was the only major nation that had positive GDP growth. So China's taking over the world, even to the sense that we used to make fun of the Chinese when they used to wear these things all the time. You say, oh, look at these people. Could you imagine living like that? You look at these people. Oh, you wear these things? And now you got the whole country freaked out, people wearing these things. So the Chinese way is taken over in so many different ways, even in the loss of all of our rights, by these little low-life pieces of slime scum called politicians telling us what to do and how to do it. So there's no Bill of Rights, there's no Constitution, it's the Chinese way. And then you look at the other things going on, and the young people, your age group is considered young when you're a guy my age, and there's revolutions going on around the world protesting against the old people in power, the military dictatorships, etc., whether it's in Myanmar, Thailand. It's the young people taking to the streets because they have no future. And you're going to see youth revolutions bursting out all around the world. As I say, when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And when you're a young person, you don't think of, what the consequences of anything are. Your head's not there, especially, when you're in your 20s, your wildest, you're not thinking of. So they're out there fighting for their lives. And we're going to start seeing a big, big movement, even in the United States. You look at the leaders of this country, and they're all these old, tight pieces of stupid junk. I mean, which one do you like the best? I mean, you like Mitch McConnell? Now, there's a sharp-looking cat. Now, I know, Nancy Pelosi. How about Dianne Not-So-Feinstein? A little Lindsey Graham. Look at her. So the young people are looking at this. What do I mean, this Biden? I mean, it's going to be the comedy of the year or the next four in the presidential reality show with all the stupid crap that comes out of Biden's, demented mind. So the young people are looking at this and what's going on over there? I don't have a job. I'm not going to college. I can't afford it. And if I do go, I'm not going to get a job. You're going to start seeing a real youth rebellion. Those are two of the big ones. And then the other one, of course, as we're looking at the economy, there's going to be a big bounce back. There's no question about it. They're dumping in all this cheap money. They're artificially propping up the equity markets around the world. I mean, it's a joke. You have right now, the British pound, for example, has just hit a 3-year high. They just had their worst quarter since 300 years ago. The GDP fell the most that it did for 300 years. And you're telling me the pound is gaining strength? How about go screw yourself? Hey, no, Celente, you don't understand. It's a rigged game. You got it? We're the hedge funds. We're the private equity groups. We're the billionaires. We'll play the game any way we want it. You don't play it with common sense. You don't play it with facts. You play it as our murderous, thieving minds will play it. All right? So, of course, the markets are going to go up. It's a fake bounce, and it's going to be a big bounce. Because people are cooped up, tied up, they want to go out and break loose, especially the young people, roaring 2021s. But it's artificial. And I mentioned hedge funds, private equity groups. Now it's like everybody, when I was a young guy, these things didn't exist. There were laws that prevented them from doing this. And now they control everything. So what you're going to see is class warfare. You saw it with GameStop, and it's not stopping. It's the young people that have had it with the old, tight, rich people owning everything. Class warfare, and it's global.
On the class warfare, what concerns me a little bit about it is what degree of it is run by is a psyop by a 3-letter intelligence agency for further control over the markets and things like that. So that concerns me a little. But looking at the subject of the markets, you said you think we'll get a big artificial bounce upwards. And I tend to feel like that's what's coming, although they've said when the treasury hits about 1.5 or so, that could collapse the whole stock market. I've had people say, they think we'll have a big artificial reinflation trade, at least for a little while before maybe, some awakening sets in. But where do you stand on that for 2021? Do you expect them to reinflation?
We call it dragflation. And that means the economy goes down as inflation goes up.
Yeah.
Look at the prices. What do you want to start with? Lumber? How about copper? Go down the list. Look at what they're hitting. Oil prices now? Look how far they shot up. You're talking now about $65 a barrel for Brent crude. A couple of months ago, it was down in the 40s. So now you got countries like India, 80% of their energy is imported. Oh, and India is doing great. I mean, I think their GDP, not this quarter, but the last one was only down like 22% or something. And they were going down before this, just to make it clear. They had 7 consecutive quarters of declining gross domestic product by the end of 2019. So they were going down before that. Again, we cover this, continually. There were strikes going on, the farmers' strike now going on. But anyway, so it's artificially propped up. There's going to be inflation. And I said what we're looking at is a GDP boost. The markets are totally artificial. What's going to bring reality back to life is when Wall Street crashes. That'll be the end. When Wall Street crashes, it will be the beginning of the reality of the greatest depression. But it won't happen until Wall Street crashes, because Main Street is totally disconnected. So nobody cares about all the people that are out of work, the millions, tens of millions of people that have lost their lives and livelihoods from this. As they've really affected their lives and livelihoods from this lockdowns. So the reality won't hit because nobody cares about the average person. Again, it's Slavelandia. We have a couple of people running the whole show. You're a non-essential business if you're not a Walmart. You're not essential if you're not a Costco or a Target. You're just a little piece of crap over here. You're not essential, so close down. So again, it goes back to the class warfare. And when the bigs fall, that's when it'll hit Main Street, will wake up to how bad it is. And that's when the greatest depression will break out. It's not going to happen until Wall Street collapses.
Yeah, so let me ask you on that, because that's the interesting kind of that I'm so infatuated with long term is, how does this all fold out? And it seems to me that it's in their best interest to, move towards a Zimbabwe or a Venezuela on whatever degree, in that they have an invisible crash where less and less people can afford things, but they don't realize exactly what's happening until if you get far enough down the road to a type of situation with currencies with Germany and Venezuela and such. And so I go, well, how could this play out? Is it that it gets bad enough with inflation one day in the future where people lose confidence in currency? But then how does Wall Street fail if they're essentially just printing money at 0%, buying all their own stocks? It seems like they could just make this thing go forever. And, Venezuela had the best performing stock market last year, so my feeling is, does it go that way? And then eventually the last people finally wake up and they go, wow, the stocks went up, but I can't buy anything anymore. Like, how do you see that? And what do you mean by Wall Street crashing, and what this whole scenario looks like? And what are your thoughts on my little rant there?
Well, you nailed it. And again, I was talking about India. India's stock market is also booming.
Oh.
And so the people will not fight back. It's just like how everybody marched off to the COVID war. There's no questioning. And so as they keep bringing it down, like you said, like a Venezuela, you don't see the protests happening. But we see the protests happening because of the young people. And again, the game, and you talked about, is it another, intelligence agency? And that's an oxymoron because there's nothing intelligent about them. But is it behind that? But you take a GameStop or something like that, that's just young people that are fed up with the system, that were really behind a lot of it. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So yes, they'll continue to do what they can to artificially prop up the equity markets. I believed that the markets would have crashed and we would have gone into the worst slump ever in 2012. They didn't teach me about zero and negative interest rate policy and a thing called quantitative easing in Economics 101 or graduate school. They made up this crap. It was a war against, again, the small people, because when I was a young guy, this might be hard to understand. They had a thing called savings accounts that you had in banks, where you put your money in the bank and they gave you interest on the money that you had in the bank. And then people used to retire and go to Florida on the money that they saved with the interest rate building. So now what they did away with interest rates so the gamblers could get the money for free and gamble. And like you said, they're buying back their stocks. So with Trump's stock thing in 2017, 2018, they bought over $1 trillion worth of stocks back. It was no tax deal. It was another break for the rich. So again, it'll be either one of the two ways. It'll be the way you said it, like in Venezuela, where things just keep going down and the people keep going down with it as the markets go up and their lives go down into nothing, or when the markets crash. When the market's going to crash at some point. When? I don't know. I believe it may happen this year, though. And because, the Fed rate, by the way, this thing about 2% inflation, that they made that crap up in 2012. They just made that number up, 2%. And they're lying about the inflation rate. Shadow Stats has the real inflation rates, John Williams' Shadow Stats. And what they did, another slimy, low-life pieces of scum crap like Bill Clinton, under that administration, they changed and they kept changing them. They changed what inflation is. So I mentioned oil prices going up. Guess what? They don't include rising oil prices as inflation. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not oil prices. Housing prices, I meant. Housing prices have gone up. The cost of buying a home, even though they've gone up like 10% or something this year, that's not inflation. They don't put the costs of houses going up as an inflation. They do include oil. They don't housing. So if you bought a house and it cost you more money, that's an asset. It's not inflation because they say when you sell it, you're going to get more for it. I mean, this is the kind of crap they're making up.
Yeah, the other thing that is renting, right? Because this is a majority, especially of my generation. And as you've had a migration out of New York and California, you're really seeing dramatic moves where I live. As I told you, huge numbers of Californians coming in, and the rent price, I mean, it probably went up 25% just since before this started because there's not enough homes, and now there's more open ones. So this cost of living concern, is something that is a trend that I'm interested in seeing how it plays out. But let me ask you, there's discussion where people say, well, the 10-year is rising, and they say, it's the whole thing's going to go down unless they do yield control over this. Do you think that they'll step in, or Yellen will step in and they'll start doing some yield control?
They'll do anything they want.
Why do you think they haven't done that yet?
Anything that they can invent, they'll do.
Why do you think they haven't?
Group. What?
Why do you think they haven't done yield control yet?
Because they're not worried enough. They're not worried yet. When the market starts going down big time, then you'll start seeing them do it.
Got it. So we're in that.
Look what's happening to gold. Gold prices are going way down because of it. I mean, you're seeing gold, taking a big hit because they're going into bonds. It's a safe haven. And you don't get any yield on gold. And so when the markets really, really start going, that's all they're concerned about. That's all they're concerned about are propping up the equity markets. End of story. End of story. And I'm not talking about a bear correction, going down more than 10%. I'm talking about going down 25, 30%, 40%. Because I mean, the PE ratios, depending on who you're looking at, they're way out of line. This is back to 1999 levels, 2000 levels before the dot-com bubble burst. And again, we did forecast that in the Trends Journal. Our October 1999 Trends Journal was dot-com bust by the second quarter of 2000. It busted in March. So anyway, we think that there's a very good shot in that we're writing about a lot of it in the magazine that this thing is going to unravel before the end of the year.
So let me ask you, one of the things that you discussed earlier was China. And to be honest with you, so I'm 29, and one of the things that concerns me most and why I started this channel, which is really a site, it's 2 million views in the last 28 days, and it's grown incredibly. But I started it purely out of my own interest in being able to communicate with people like you. I was studying and following, and in my own private studies, the China theme is one that concerns me, being 29 and having a 6-month-old. So, having a solid 50 years and my daughter having, maybe 80, 90 years. And that's what happens here? We have on the right and left, many of the gatekeeper politicians are bought out by China. On the local level, many are bought out by China. There's China's, so involved and has bought out or playing major roles in so many corporations. Then you have the medical establishment with China. And what concerns me is where that goes. And so when you say a China takeover, what does that look like? Because as communist, I go, is it that they eventually want to legitimately take it over on the outside, or do they do it all through covert operations? And then what does it tangibly look like if this continues? Because people say, oh, we're not in a war with China. China has been in a war with us, and they're a lot more intelligent and a lot more strategic, and they knew they could use fiat currency to buy out our entire system. They knew they couldn't win in a military war, but they knew we were stupid enough to take control of us through this back door. But what does it look like on the other side of this?
Well, first of all, let's see how it really happened. And the big sellouts, you got one that's playing president right now, when they did away with GATT, and they did away, and then Bill Clinton, bringing the NAFTA, that was the beginning of it, with bringing the jobs down to Mexico for cheaper labor. And it was Clinton that brought China into the World Trade Organization. You look at China's GDP from 1970 to when they get in the World Trade Organization. By the way, they officially signed in 2 weeks after 9/11, when nobody was paying any attention. And all the BS that used to happen when they're bringing China in. Well, we know that there are problems with communist China and their human rights issues, but we're going to demand that they live up to the standards of, they started putting out all that crap, Anyway, you look at their GDP, 2001. All right? All the manufacturers in the United States and Europe that wanted to get their stuff made by slave labor countries, the deal's this. Yeah, you got to manufacture it over here in China. We don't have the technology, but you stupid, arrogant people that just want to make money and don't care about your people and just want more profit so you can make your stuff cheaper, bring it back and mark the price up and make more money. You got to manufacture it here. So now we learn all your manufacturing from high tech to heavy industry. Oh, and by the way, when you manufacture it here, you got to partner with one of our so-called private companies, which is a government company, and you can only own 49% of the business. So they've taken over. They have all the high tech. They have everything they need. You mentioned about war. Let's get this straight. America hasn't won a war since World War II. And they wouldn't have won that one without Russia, if everybody forgets that one too. Oh, well, you lost the Korean War? Hey, how come? Oh, it was the Chinese. Yeah, those SK, yeah, that's the ones, yeah. The Chinese, that's why you lost in Korea. You can't win in Afghanistan. You've been there for 20 years. You lost in Iraq. You're going to beat the Chinese? Save it. You know what the war would be with the Chinese? It would be like when they asked Einstein, what weapons will be used to fight the Third World War? He said, I don't know. He said, but they'll be using sticks and stones to fight the fourth. There won't be any war. It'll be the end of the world. And that, I shouldn't say there won't be, because we've got sick people running and ruining our lives. They're psychopaths, sociological, they're sociopaths, they're psychopaths, pathological liars, sociopaths. They're people out of their minds. We got crazy people running the world. So China's only interested in making money. So where does America go? They go down. It goes down. Economically, it goes down. Our standard of living drops. The spirit of the people gets lower. Who we are, what we become, what we put out, what we produce gets lower. Again, go to Venezuela. It's a good example. Look at it. By the way, that place was ruined by big oil back in the day. I'll never forget, I was in graduate school. I had a guy that was my roommate. And boy, he had a brand new, car. And his father, one of the most arrogant guys I ever met in my life. His daddy was rich, in the oil business in Venezuela. The people were treated like garbage. And that's what's going to happen in America. The bigs are taking over everything. You mentioned Walmart. I remember when there was fighting back in the late 80s about Walmarts being allowed to go into cities because they were wiping out the other businesses. It's a monopoly. They let the monopolies take over. So that's what happens. It goes down. There's not going to be a war with China. Again, if there's a war with China, it's the end of the world.
Yeah, that's what I think too. And that's what's so interesting about this kind of secret takeover is I feel they did this all strategically and they knew that. And what they did instead was basically just take everything over. And now they're starting to corner the commodities and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I was curious how you thought that it looks like on the other side. I think that's an interesting take that they don't want to do a war. They just want to be number one, and our standard goes down. Our standard of living goes down at the other end of that.
And I want to make this again to keep tying into it. We were covering the protests in Hong Kong when they first broke out every week. I was on Hong Kong TV on and on and on as the protests were going on. And I talked to the, like we talked before on air and off, and I say to the guys, so what's going on? We're not gonna let Beijing take over. We're not gonna live under that rule. This Hong Kong, the deal was when the British finally gave it back after colonizing. Isn't that a nice word, colonizing it? After they took over the place. The deal was I think like 50 years, it would be a dual economy, a dual country. They had their rights in Hong Kong, but it was under the power of Beijing. Now those rights are gone. Anyway, the guy said, we're going to keep fighting. Of course, now what happened when the COVID broke out in war on China, China all of a sudden started shutting down cities, and they shut down Hong Kong. That was the end of the protests. Then they passed a security law. It's over. No more protests, gone, finished, brought the military, it's over. BlackRock, one after another, doing business in China and Hong Kong. Hong Kong is still the major Asian banking center, and more stocks and money and equities are flooding into Hong Kong. The Western hedge funds, private equity groups, all the gamblers, poof, flooding into it. So again, it's all about the bottom line. And that's what China understands. And they also have something interesting called dual circulation policy, in the sense that they know that exports are going to start going down as the economy goes down. So they're building in the internal economy. Unlike the Western nations and many others where the central banks flooded money into the systems, China didn't do that during 2020. They put more money into infrastructure building. So they're building up the nation internally. So they want to build their GDP, a greater amount of their GDP based on internal manufacturing and consumption rather than exports, where the Western nations sold out their manufacturing and now we're just doing consumption. So it's dual circulation.
Interesting. So I know you got to get going here soon. So last question, where do you see gold going from here? Do you think that we need more of another correction for gold to move? Do you think that once yield control steps in and people seem to have a fair grasp of the fact that they're just going to print currency infinitely until something bad happens? I mean, what does it take to make gold begin to move?
Well, first of all, I stay by our forecast that we still see gold going to 2,100 this year and silver breaking over 50. Silver, we've been saying since June, when it was $17.50 an ounce last June, we said it was the beginning of the spike, and now it's like playing in the 27 mark. And we said it would rise at a higher percentage rate than gold. And the reasons being, there's no stockpiles of silver. Once you throw it out of your phone or your computer, keyboard, and it's the best conductor of electricity, so they keep needing it. And especially now in the green age with solar paneling and more, they're going to be using more silver. And again, there's no stockpiles of it because you throw it away. Gold has stockpiles. Central banks will continue to buy gold. Gold will still be the precious metal, the most safe haven asset. I believe the prices are going to start spiking. Yes, they're going into bonds now because you're getting a better yield, but when inflation starts going up, that's when gold really starts to fly. And when the dollar starts taking a beating, that's when you're going to start seeing gold really moving much higher. When the lower the dollar goes, the stronger gold goes. And if they keep pumping more cheap money in, the dollar's going down. That's why, by the way, you're seeing also more activity in emerging markets, because their currencies now are not as weak. So they're going back into that to play that game to try to make profit in there, the gamblers. So the weaker the dollar goes, the more the other currencies are worth. But there's going to be a time, we believe, when they all go down.
Okay, we want to thank Gerald Celente for coming on today. Right there down below, you'll see the link to the Trends Journal. You can go ahead and you can check that out or sign up to it in the description. Make sure you hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Right over there and right over there on this side. It'll send this video out to more people. Give us a comment down below and let us know what you think of today's episode. Last but not least, thanks again to our sponsor today, which is First Majestic. So if you're looking for a new silver stock, check out First Majestic Silver.